Senator from Virginia, Mark Warner. He is the vice chairman of the Select Committee on Intelligence. He also sits on the Committee on Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs, and the budget, and it rules, and all that good stuff. And he's right in the middle of everything going on right now. Couldn't have him at a better time. Senator Warner, great to have you with us, sir.
Well, John, good morning, and congratulations on being back on in the greater D.C., Northern Virginia area.
Well, I only got on because they heard I would get Mark Warner on my show, so then they jumped on it.
No, you only got on because, we don't always agree, but you always got a strong point of view, and I have enormous respect for you.
Well, thank you, Senator. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. Let's get to intel, and let's start with the Russian investigation. Before we get to Trump, what about these Facebook ads they did that you guys are looking into? Now, they spend, it seems like about $100,000 on Facebook ads in a national campaign, right? That's not a lot of money, but they're still involved. Where are you guys at with this?
Well, John, this is one of the things that I think is still emerging. Starting back in January, I said it seems to me that the Russians not only tried to mess with our electoral systems, not only released information during the campaign, but it came to my attention that they were using the social media platforms, Facebook and Twitter in particular, to in two ways. One, they were purchasing ads that would sow discontent, and two, probably more important, and we've not focused as much on this yet, is they had fake accounts. They had somebody that said they were John Fredericks, but it was really, Boris Godunov in Moscow masquerading as John Fredericks, liking certain accounts, liking certain pages. For the first 7 or 8 months of this year, Facebook, Twitter, Google, they kind of all ignored that, blew it off, said there's nothing here. Then starting in the middle of the summer, they started to say, well, we did a little research, and actually there is something here. And they should have known beforehand, because during the French elections, the Russians tried to do the same thing. Facebook worked with the French. They took down 50,000 accounts. So when Facebook finally came forward and said, well, we found these, this small amount of ads, and I think on Facebook it was around $100,000,
right?
Which, as you said, is not that much. And they found about 450 accounts. Here's why I feel like they've not, let's take Facebook to start with, where I feel like they've not exposed, it may just be the tip of the iceberg. In France, they identified 50,000 accounts. In the United States, 9 months after the fact, they identified 450 accounts. Just the numbers are way out of whack there.
Right.
I got to believe there was as much Russian activity, if not more, in America than there was in France. Secondly, in terms of the ads they've identified, they identified one Russian troll farm, and they only identified the ads that were paid for in rubles. Now, I got to tell you, the Russians are pretty smart. I believe if they were trying to place ads in this country, they would not simply pay in rubles. They might have had some other accounts. And, they didn't even run the same numbers to see, did those accounts buy any other ads using dollars or euros or pounds? So they're going back now. I think they realize now that this is a serious matter, and not even so much what simply that they did in 2016, but on a return on investment basis. If the Russians' goal, and we could argue whether they wanted to favor Trump or not favor Trump, but they clearly wanted to sow chaos, they got a pretty good return on investment. And I think it's raised a bigger debate. If somebody puts an ad on the John Fredericks Show, you've got to put a disclaimer on there. And if I don't like that ad, if somebody's running an ad against me, I can come and at least hear it someplace. There's an ad at your station, let me hear it. In the whole realm of political advertising in digital, there's no such requirement. So if I run some nasty thing about Donald Trump, I don't have to identify that I paid for it. Facebook currently has no responsibility to keep that ad and show somebody like you who's a supporter of the president. You ought to be able to hear the contents of what I'm saying bad about the president. And so we're trying, and we'll have a bipartisan legislation to say one of the first steps is let's at least level the playing field here a little bit. And if you want to run ads on Facebook and Google, and increasingly that's where I think political advertising is moving, that have the same disclosure requirements that if you run an ad on radio, TV, or newsprint.
No, look, absolutely. That makes sense. There's got to be an accountability here by anybody that's taking money for ads that is going to affect politics. That's why we have these laws. That's why, as you said.
Yeah, and what we're trying to do is light a touch as possible. I don't want to regulate the internet, and I don't want to overreach. I just want to try to say, hey, let's put people on notice. You want to say something bad about or good about the president or about me, that's fair game. But one, let's make sure that, you as a supporter of the president, me as wanting to know what people are saying about me, I can go hear it, because a lot of times these ads would appear and then disappear. And secondly, the companies ought to make some good faith effort to make sure that if there's an account that says John Fredericks is saying awful things about Mark Warner, they ought to try to make sure that it really is John Fredericks and not, some fake account coming out of Russia.
No question. Senator Warner, your investigation of Trump collusion, it's been going on now for months and months and months. I know you said you're still gathering information. I know you interviewed some people recently, but so far we have no evidence of any collusion by President Trump, anybody in his staff. When does this thing end?
Well, John, I'd like it to end as soon as we've completed all the facts. I mean, that's one thing. And if there ends up being nothing, I'll get on the John Fredericks Show and say there was nothing. But we have not, for example, let me just run through a couple things here. We've not interviewed yet Donald Trump Jr. We've not interviewed yet, for example, Michael Cohen, who we plan on interviewing next week, who is, at least in public press reports, was involved in the efforts to bring the Trump Tower to Moscow.
Right.
Before, for example, on Donald Trump Jr., we want to make sure on the famous meeting where supposedly the Russian lawyer, whether it was about adoptions or whether it was about dirt on Clinton, we want to talk to everybody else in the room first. We want to see Mr. Cohen. We want to see there's a number of other names. And frankly, one of the things that surprises me is, every month it feels like there's some new story that pops up. During the summer it was the Donald Trump Jr. meeting. Then it was for example, the Trump Tower Moscow meeting. I know your listeners, want this thing to go away. Frankly, I want it to be finished as soon as possible as well. But I also think we owe people who feel, some people want this all go away. Some people want to condemn the president without the facts in. I would love at the end of the day, and I'm working towards this, that we have a bipartisan answer so that we tell folks, here's what we found. If we find something, yes. If we didn't find something, no. And we actually don't have two versions of the facts. One where a bunch of, there's a Republican version and a Democratic version. And yes, it's taking longer than I'd like, but I think part of that is due to the fact that we keep finding new information that has to be at least investigated.
All right, but it sounds like what you're saying, Senator Warner, is that you're committed here to getting to the truth that this, I said at the beginning when this started, I thought you were behaving like a statesman in this whole thing. We need statesmen in this country in a nonpartisan view. We all want to get to the truth and then get it behind us. And if there's anything there, then I think, as you said, you need to come on my show and say, hey, he's clear, nothing happened, let's all move on. Because this is a distraction. Of course, there's many of us that, believe very strongly in this president's agenda, and we see this simply as a partisan distraction. But I'm going to trust you on it.
Yeah, trust me. Listen,
I'm going to trust you.
I would ask, I can't judge all the other things.
Right.
But if you look at the bipartisan way,
right,
incoming flack from both sides,
right,
two things that we have discovered. The Russians have got a very sophisticated misinformation and disinformation campaign. They didn't just use it against America. They intervened in the French elections. They intervened in the Dutch elections. And the two things that, for example, the chairman, Richard Burr, Republican from North Carolina, I had a press conference 10 days ago. And two things we need to be on guard. 21 states, and this is not Mark Warner and Richard Burr, Donald Trump's Department of Homeland Security told 21 states the Russians at least tried to, if not fully penetrate the electoral systems, they tested some of our defenses. They didn't go in and change vote totals. Let's not get there. But they did try to mess with our voting systems. And it took DHS 9 months to indicate which states. One of those states was Virginia. I'm very concerned because, the Russians aren't pro-Republican or pro-Democrat. They're pro-Russia.
Right.
So, I want to make sure our systems are people have got trust in the systems. Excuse me. Luckily in Virginia, we actually took out some of the voting machines that didn't have, paper trail modern technology.
Right.
So we know they may be back on our electoral systems. And this whole issue that we just discussed about using these social media platforms, which increasingly, most Americans get their news from. Let's at least have some disclosure. So I would think even the people who don't like the investigation on the possibility of collusion will say we're discovering areas where we can make our country safer.
All right, let's go to Senator Mark Warner. Let's go to Obamacare. President Trump late on Friday saying they're going to end what they called illegal payments that were never appropriated by Congress to insurers selling Obamacare plans. These are called the cost sharing reductions, or CSRs, on a monthly basis. Now, the Trump administration has been paying them for 8 months. The Obama administration has been paying them for 50 months. But there's lawsuits that Boehner brought way back when saying that they're illegal because they never got passed through the appropriations properly. They amount to $7 billion. He's taking them out. What happens?
Yeah. Well, what happens is you're going to have lots of millions of Americans and hundreds of thousands of Virginians lose their health care, and you're going to have rates jack up dramatically. And this is why I think you're seeing a whole lot of Republican senators now say, holy heck, we may want to change Obamacare, but we don't want to own the whole market collapsing. And these are not payments to insurance companies where the insurance companies put the money in their pockets. And this is paying for some of the people who are the sickest, who otherwise drive up the cost of the people who are not sick. And there was a piece of Obamacare that allowed payments to go to these insurance companies to take the sickest of the sick. Well, frankly, that's where most of the cost around insurance derive. That got taken out of Obamacare a couple of years ago, which were called, at that point, risk corridors. You're right, they did. The Obama administration started to put this in administratively. Mr. Trump, now after 8 months of paying them, has stopped this. There is a bipartisan effort that I hopefully will get done this week that will restore and stabilize the market for a couple of years so that we can actually see where we could come together and throw out what's wrong with Obamacare and actually fix what's good about Obamacare. I think this kind of bilateral, you either love it all or hate it all. I just, again, respectfully, John, this is one where you and I are going to disagree, and probably a lot of your audience will disagree with me. The president's tried legislatively 3 different times. He couldn't even get a majority. He couldn't even get all the Republicans to agree with him because, the plans that they put forward, as many problems that Obamacare's got, the only thing that made Obamacare popular with the public was when they saw Trump Care. And Trump Care was going to end up, throwing 25 million Americans off their health care and, add to the deficit. What I wish would happen, and people love Medicare, they love Social Security. Congress never got those programs right the first time. It took going back after a few years and saying, okay, what did we get right, what did we get wrong? Unfortunately, on Obamacare, both sides have been so hard on about we either got to repeal it entirely, or some of the Democrats, or we can't touch a word of it. And, that's just not the way the world works. As you know, I was a business guy longer than I've been a politician. Mm-hmm. I've never seen a major healthcare or any other major plan put in place that doesn't need tinkering with.
Well, look, Senator Mark Warner, the bottom line, though, here is that I agree with President Trump and the administration on the fact that a lot of people I've talked to have said these administrative payments, these CSRs, are illegal. They're outside of the Constitution. Money has got to be appropriated through Congress. So why don't you guys just get together? If you think this is the right thing to do, get together and pass legislation that then revalidates the payments rather than go around the system administratively. Why not? If what you're saying is accurate, Senator, why not just do it the right way?
Well, I think and John, I think, after the last Obamacare repeal failed, there were 2 senators, Lamar Alexander from Tennessee, Patty Murray from Washington, who've been working on a bipartisan short-term fix. Isn't going to make everybody happy. And they kind of said, well, hold off until they had this last effort, the so-called Graham Cassidy. When that failed, they went back to work. I believe they'll get a deal this week. I think if it came to the floor, it would pass the Senate with probably 70-plus votes. Whether the House would pass it or not would then be a debate. And remember, let me let your listening audience know, I've been in favor of things on this show. Go back and check the records where I believe we ought to have cheaper option plans. I'd call them a copper plan. You have
right.
Gold, silver, bronze. Offer a cheaper plan, particularly for younger people, so they can get into the system. I favor allowing insurance companies, as long as they've got appropriate protections in place, to sell products across state lines. I don't know if it's going to lower rates that much, but let's try it. I favor getting rid of some of the reporting requirements in Obamacare, which are burdensome to small businesses. So there's a lot of things that I think where I know there needs to be fixes in Obamacare. What has frustrated me has been, from the beginning, the Obamacare efforts, at least in the Senate, the Republicans used a process that's called reconciliation, which basically says instead of needing to get 60 votes, you only need to get 51 votes.
Right.
So they basically said to the Democrats, hey, we don't need you. We're going to try to do this on our own. That failed a couple of times. And, I wish they would have said, I think it would have been easier to get 60 votes out of 100 than it would be to get 51 out of 52. And my fear is, as somebody who, I've been on this show a lot of times. I first met you when you came to the state, and I was working on debt and deficit reduction.
Yes.
I know the budget inside.
The Gang of Six.
I know where there's places to cut, and I'm afraid on tax reform we're going to see a repeat of the Obamacare mess, because they're using this same process called reconciliation on tax reform. And I think the chance of tax reform passing now are pretty slim if you only try to do it with one team.
Well, look, that's how you got Obamacare through, though. So, I mean, there is a duplicity here, a double standard. You didn't get a single Republican for that. You got that through, and many people have been dealing with a disaster for that as far as their premiums going up has really hammered the middle class. I've got a question, though, from Alan in Portsmouth. He said, I want to ask the senator about what about the Obama administration and their involvement in the Israeli election, sending operatives over there. Isn't that a double standard?
Well, what Alan ought to do.
Alan
ought to do. I've not heard those reports. Let me look at them. I know there were American political consultants that worked on both sides in the Israeli election, some working for the opposition, some working for Netanyahu. The American politicos, whether it's Axelrod or Karl Rove, and I'm not getting the exact people who were in the Israeli elections. They do a big business abroad, but if he's got evidence, he could get it to your office and let me look into this. The idea that the Obama administration sent over and weighed in directly in the Israeli elections, I'd love to see evidence of that.
All right.
As the Obama administration. Now, there may have been Obama supporters that went over and got paid, just as there were people that worked for Netanyahu. And the same thing happened in the UK elections and a lot of places. One of the things that's happened in our political campaigns is so much money spent. As more and more elections look like the American elections, the political consultants are the ones who make money no matter who wins or who loses, unfortunately.
That's called the swamp.
That's called the swamp.
You got that right. It doesn't matter who wins. They're in the only business where results and accountability don't matter. You lose, you make more money. It's incredible. Look, I got to get out, but we got to make a prediction right here, you and I, in the prediction business. Is Trump's tax reform going to pass by Christmas? Yes or no?
No. But if it doesn't pass and he comes back and says, hey, let's try to actually get 60 or 65 votes and recognize we got the world's most complicated tax code. We got the world's highest nominal rates, yet we only collect out of the 34 industrial nations. We're actually one of the lowest tax industrial nations in the world. That means we got a screwed up tax code, and it ought to be fixed. If he comes back and says that and says, let's sit down together, I think he'd have an awful lot of folks. I know 25 plus Democrats who would love to see that happen.
All right. That's going to be the final word. I want to thank U.S. Senator from Virginia, Mark Warner, Vice Chairman, Intel Committee, for being with us. Hey, Senator, it's always great to have you on. Thank you so much.
John, thanks so much. Keep giving them